Thank you, sir. And I think it's an insightful presentation, and I thought we could extend a few minutes. By this time, we should be actually eating, but unfortunately, the previous session pushed a little bit of our session. So I decided that we'll take one question from the audience because it's really stretching to the line during the lunchtime, and we have a very heavy session in the afternoon. So in the interest of time, I would like to invite one question. Okay, Namge. Your question needs to be straightforward and shortcut.
Thank you all. Hello, I'm Namgi Chodin. My question, Ojigmi, if you could perhaps share one or 2 points in which Bhutan can do better in terms of transparency and the quality of the data that we put out, especially drawing from your experience with the UNFCCC. But also soliciting a few words from Professor Burke-White. What do you think needs to be there in the domestic legislative environment that makes states more comfortable or more obliged to be more transparent with their data? Thank you.
Jimmy, sir.
Yeah, can you hear? Yeah, okay. No, thank you. Actually, your question really ties up with something that I forgot to mention. As you know, if I understand correctly, Bhutan will graduate from LDC on 13th December 2023. And as a result of that, the status of Bhutan will also change under Paris Agreement. So it will move from LDC to developing country cluster. And under one of the significant milestones next year under Paris Agreement would be submission of first progress report on the implementation of Paris Agreement. And that is mandatory, legally mandatory for all parties except LDCs and SIDS who, on the account of their special circumstances, enjoy they can do so at their discretion. So that is there. And personally, I think that Bhutan should make efforts to submit this progress report in a timely manner, which is before 31st December 2024. Because I would expect a lot of attention, focus around this process next year. We in the Secretariat, we are trying to develop a global momentum and raise political profile on the submission of this first progress report. Formally, it is referred to as biennial transparency reports, and that has to be submitted by 31st December 2024. So that's on the timing side. On the quality side, when this Article 13 was negotiated, it was on the understanding that parties will have different starting point. And that's why there are 2 key principles embedded within this Article 13. The first one is provision of flexibility to developing countries who would need it in the light of their capacity. And the second one is this notion of improvement over a period of time to make sure that whatever capacity that exists does not get locked in forever, but there is incremental growth. So in terms of quality, I won't be too much worried with that for now, because the reporting under Paris Agreement is going to happen every 2 years. And I keep on saying that quality is function of time. You do it once, incrementally improve, do it again. As you over a period of time, this quality will come naturally. And that is what the past experience demonstrate. For example, the inventory, the greenhouse gas inventory from developing countries are at a very high quality. But it took them 20 years to get to this stage. So if you look at their first version, the quality would be questionable. But the message here is we shouldn't worry about quality too much right from get-go. What is more important is to make sure that we have the ingredients right here. And here, when I say ingredients, things like having strong institutional arrangements in place, strong, that empowers different sectors, ministries to advance this work, that there is strong political support. That also seems to play an instrumental role in ability to fulfill some of these commitments. Obviously, capacity building, financial resources will continue to exist, but I think the overriding success factors are political buy-in and institutional arrangement. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
I know that time is short, so we may need to connect during lunch, but I'll say a couple of brief thoughts. What domestic legislation is needed? First, international law should be enforceable in domestic courts. That's what allowed the success of the Netherlands case that I mentioned. That is not true in my own country, but having the enforceability domestically is incredibly important. Second, I think for transparency, we have to not just think about states. States are relatively transparent. They have to, most of them do provide information. The transparency I want to see is corporate transparency. And to do that, you need disclosure requirements. And disclosure requirements usually are going to be a legal requirement that any corporation that's headquartered in a particular country or that is listed on a stock market in that particular country needs to submit on an annual basis essentially their carbon footprint and what they're doing to respond to the threats of climate change. And this disclosure requirement can be incredibly influential because it means that a company that isn't making its disclosures may not be able to access capital, say in Europe, a US company that isn't, and that's a really strong pressure. And once that data is public, we can all respond to it and say we're not going to buy from that company or we're not going to engage with that company. So the biggest domestic legislation I would like to see to promote transparency is mandatory climate-related disclosure requirements for any business operating in or headquartered in that country.
Thank you, Professor Williams. Professor Suresh wants to take 30 seconds to add one line on that. Very quickly. Sure.
Thank you. I would just like to add, because I think what Bill has said is absolutely right and important. What is equally important as well is this is where states can help, because for corporates to disclose, there needs to be enforceable disclosure requirements. First of all, there needs to be disclosure requirement in place, set up a machinery set up by the states, not merely tax havens that you can go off scoot, and it needs to be a enforceable and very clear regime for reporting requirements. Thank you.
Thank you all the panelists. I think I definitely would like to thank everyone for sparing your time, and I know there is so much to discuss, but time doesn't stop, so therefore I think the only way is we stop and then we take a break to have a lunch, and definitely I think after the lunch we are going to have another interesting session. Thank you very much, everybody.